Thank you for joining us today. I'm Bruce Goldstein, President of Farmworker Justice in Washington, D.C. Welcome to the Facebook program series, The State of Farmworkers in America in the COVID-19 Era. Farmworkers have been designated as essential workers to ensure our nation's food security during the COVID-19 pandemic. Yet their working conditions create grave risks to their health and economic status. These programs raise awareness about the serious challenges the pandemic imposes on farm workers and their family members each and every day. The series will identify impactful work and innovative ideas being carried out by Farmworker Justice and other organizations that represent and serve farm workers. We very much appreciate the opportunity to interview our next guest today. Our guest is Stephen Hernandez. He is the mayor of Coachella, California. Welcome, Stephen.
Thank you, Bruce, and I just want to thank Farmworkers Justice for doing this series in such a time.
Well, it's definitely necessary to spread the word about what farm workers are going through and what people like yourself are doing to help farm workers through it. So our audience may be familiar with the famous Coachella Festival, more so than with the Coachella Valley as a major agricultural production area in this country. So could you please first tell us about the city of Coachella and the Valley of Coachella?
Yeah, so, the Valley is very diverse when we're talking about economics. There's a lot of diversity with respect to, very high affluent folks. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have areas with high amounts of poverty. But when you think about the Valley in general, our two main economic engines here are ag and tourism. Tourism being about $7.5 billion of gross economic output, and then agriculture about $1.5 billion in agriculture, primarily centered out of the city of Coachella and the eastern end of the Coachella Valley, which is some of the unincorporated communities of Mecca, Thermal, and Oasis. So that's, I will say that ag and water rights, and it's been well documented, is how the Valley got its start. And this is upwards in 1800s when the Valley got its start. So ag is a big part of the Coachella Valley, and obviously the farm worker is a big part of the Coachella Valley. And I happen to represent our farm worker community. We're a community of about 48,000 people, and I would say about 33 to about 36% of our population is newly immigrated, and the rest is either first generation or second generation into the United States when we're talking about our demographics in the city of Coachella.
And I've had the privilege of visiting you in Coachella. And I believe you told me that the position of mayor of Coachella is actually a part-time position. So please tell us about your role as mayor and a little bit about your background and how you came to be mayor of Coachella.
Well, thank you. I've been mayor now for 6 years. However, I've been part of the city administration, either as a council member, mayor pro tem, or mayor, for 14 years. I was born and raised in the city of Coachella. I was actually raised by my grandparents, who were braceros. My grandparents arrived from Sinaloa, Mexico in about 1947. My grandpa actually did, and then he got deported a few times, and then the bracero program came along, and my grandpa was able to come into the United States through a guest worker program, and then obviously go through the immigration process when we had a process out in the 1950s. Early on, my grandmother instilled a sense of service in me. And even when she would introduce herself, she always would say, her name was Loreto. She'd say, Loreto Cota para servirles. And I think it was that spirit that ultimately, was driven in me and that was nourished in me through my grandparents. So early on, we as a household, I would say that my grandma's house, it was, I think, kind of akin to the modern day immigrant, Harriet Tubman kind of experience, not so much freeing slaves, but in our case, we were freeing and helping immigrants that were arriving from Mexico and bringing them into the United States workforce. And I know many families that either knocked on my grandma's door and asked for a cup of water or food, and she'd always feed everybody. And so, you know, that kind of initiated, again, the service. And so I ran for city council, age of 23. I was fortunate enough to win. I'm now 37, 14 years later, I'm here as mayor. It's not a full-time position in terms of being at the office every day, but it is a full-time position in terms of the service that you need to give to your constituents. Outside of being mayor, however, I am the chief of staff to the county supervisor, Victor Manuel Perez in the Coachella Valley, which is out of the 4th district. And I've been part of county government for now 17 years, since I was 20 years old, working in the county of Riverside as well.
And how about telling us a little bit about the crops that are grown and harvested in the Coachella Valley?
Absolutely. So in the Coachella Valley, we grow 122 different commodities. I mean, they range anywhere from lemons and oranges and grapefruit to dates. We got a lot of winter variety vegetables out here. The tomatoes are actually looking really healthy this time of year. And then there's things such as cannabis and hemp that are some of the newer crops that have been allowed to be grown out here in the Coachella Valley. So we do it all, and we got a great amount of different crops, so just you know, radishes to watermelon, and you know, one of the interesting things, or unique things, bell peppers. I know that we're used to now seeing you know, red and yellow bell peppers, but that was actually engineered out here in the Coachella Valley, and so we do have a bunch of different bell peppers fields out here. So there is a huge variety of different commodities and produce that is grown out here in the Coachella Valley, including bok choy things.
That's amazing. And I've driven also by the Coachella Valley, the date palm trees with people all the way up in these tremendously high date palm trees. I mean, dangerous work and difficult. Yeah, no, the date industry is it's a big industry. In fact, the Coachella Valley provides, I would say, upwards of 80% of the dates for the rest of the nation. And you know, you'll be surprised. A lot of people think about dates, and you know, they think about kind of the date nugget, and they don't necessarily realize that in your granola bar, the adhesive or the sticky stuff that keeps your granola bar whole is actually date paste. And so it's used in a lot of different areas, and there's a huge variety of dates here in the Coachella Valley, jewel dates, deglet dates, parhi dates. There's a whole number of different dates, and we actually have a festival out here. It's called the Riverside County National Fair and Date Festival. We really like our dates in the Coachella Valley. Well, we do too. So, being in such an intensively farm worker community, we wanted to ask you what you're seeing in terms of the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic on farm workers and their families and the community.
You know, since the COVID crisis has occurred, there's been a number of different issues that are transpiring through the crisis. The most essential issue, and I think this is somewhere that it's not only in the agricultural field, but it's in what is deemed essential workers. How do we keep our essential workers safe? And by that is how do businesses, how do the company owners ensure that there are different guidelines and protocols that will keep their employees safe. What we are seeing and what we have seen, for example, in one of our actually date in Baca's warehouses, upwards of 15 workers actually got sick with COVID, and one of them actually passed away. And what is happening in some of these industries is that there are a lack of guidelines. I think that when we think of COVID, it really hit government institutions by surprise, and I think we weren't necessarily ready for protecting our essential workers. I think we've been concentrating on the response. I think we've been concentrating on handling the emergency. But when it comes to essential workers, how do we protect them? And so initially, there was a lack of communication on covering your face, for example, cleaning some of the warehouses that perhaps might have got in contact or might have had a spread going on. I think there sometimes is a lack or a difficulty in maintaining social distancing within these warehouses because sometimes the work doesn't allow for social distancing. I think at the same time, the state, in our case OSHA, was lacking in guidelines, and we try to work, and we did work with the Riverside County Ag Commissioner to put together a number of different guidelines to help these industries so that we can try to protect our workers. The next phase of what I see occurring, or what has also been occurring, is if you are sick, are the companies actually paying you for staying home or for protecting a loved one? The good thing here in the state of California, the governor actually mandated that, so companies have to be doing that, but it's only for 2 weeks. And outside of those 2 weeks, or what happens beyond that is the question. And there are some cases of COVID where the recovery time is longer than 2 weeks. So it's yet to be seen what is going to be occurring after those 2 weeks, or what happens. Now, obviously, they can apply for unemployment if they're a citizen or a legal resident. But if they're unemployed, then that becomes a lot harder. The next thing that's occurring, or that we see right now, is there is potentially going to be a huge loss in employment for our agricultural workers. Why? Because the demand for their harvest, the demand for the fruits and vegetables has actually gone down significantly. And there are areas right now through California, and I know those areas throughout the nation, that are starting to plow the vegetables back into the ground because they're not necessarily harvesting because there simply isn't a demand. Now, we haven't seen that yet in the Coachella Valley because our spring crop is actually harvested in May. But I do have a meeting at about 1 o'clock today with the CV Grow Association to talk about how we can help with direct sales. And then I've also started a little program where I'm trying to create these fresh boxes of produce that can be given to our students when they're going to pick up their meals. And I'm trying to we were able to get a little bit of a test run through the 3 school districts out here in the Coachella Valley. I'm trying to take that countywide, where the produce that is being harvested here, we can put it in the school districts would buy it. They can put it in a box, give the students a recipe of how to make the food. We can get it to their households, and that way people can start eating fresh greens and vegetables. But it's been a number of series of different things. But I think the main thing is that how do we keep our essential workers safe in this COVID era?
And are you able to talk directly with agricultural employers, that is the businesses, to try to improve. Some employers are trying to, help workers be protected, but you and others are telling us that there's a lot of gaps in the way these essential workers on the farms are being treated. Are you able to talk directly with the companies to encourage them to take stronger steps?
Absolutely. The one thing I will say is that our grower association out here has been very open to receiving feedback from government. The issue that I see is that government, because we're dealing with the emergency, because we're dealing with, ensuring that the frontline folks have, protective gear and the PPEs that they need, because we're trying to get safety out there or testing out there, because we're trying to, feed folks and provide for the food deserts and food insecurities that a lot of folks are seeing, and setting up moratoriums for housing, et cetera. It's been difficult to shift from kind of dealing with the emergency to providing the guidelines. So there is folks that are out there, and obviously the Agriculture Commissioner, Cal OSHA, the state of California, stepping up finally as well to start providing those guidelines. But it was a little bit of a lag specifically early on in the first few weeks. There was a lag in their ability to provide those guidelines. It's getting better now. I think that if you're seeing it in grocery stores where people are wearing their protective gear, and now we're starting to see it in some of the warehouses and the picking that's going on in the Coachella.
Thank you. Now, you've talked about some of the things that you've been working on to have government do to help farm workers protect themselves and be protected. But one of the problems we've had, especially at the federal level, is getting programs and services available for undocumented immigrants. So there was a massive infusion of funding for unemployment compensation to expand to a lot of people who weren't able to get it in the past. But if you're an undocumented immigrant, you can't get it. And as you say, there's a risk of a lot of unemployment in your area, and there's undoubtedly a lot of undocumented immigrants among the farm workers in your community.
No, absolutely. That is a real issue. I think that one of the things that COVID has brought to light is just how essential our immigrant community is and our undocumented community is in the food chain. We all need to eat every single day. And it is our immigrant community that is out there risking their lives and providing for our food chain. Now, what we have done in the Coachella Valley to address this issue is we've actually established a fund. There's a nonprofit here that's called Lift to Rise, and we established a fund where we started raising a substantial amount of money. We're upwards of $1 million now to start providing for some of the undocumented community within the Coachella Valley. They're going to be able to get about $200 a week as a family, and possibly more. Now, the state of California has also moved forward on providing for the undocumented community. And I think it's important that we recognize the work, because if you think about it, and if now I know there's not the demand has waned, but there still is a demand for fruits and vegetables and for our food. And it's our immigrant community that frankly is out there and harvesting. I've had conversations with folks saying, hey, why should we give them anything? And I'm saying, well, aren't you eating, or aren't you thinking about your family's health? And I said, by the way, if you need a job and you want to go out there and harvest these vegetables, there are jobs out there for you. And I haven't seen a lot of people step up. And frankly, I don't know anybody that stepped up and said so far and say, hey, I'm going to go out there and harvest the crop. But it's very essential and very important that we protect our immigrant community.
Right, and I was going to ask you about the other issues that farm workers face. Besides the risks of COVID-19, the heat in the Coachella Valley is unbelievable. Maybe you could tell our audience what farm workers have to work through.
You know, just recently, we got up to about 102. So it is hot. You know, there are OSHA standards, and OSHA is the state agency that provides for safety and industrial hygiene in the workforce. And yeah, it is very hot, you know, and so sometimes you're out there and the crop is also, it's very humid inside these different fields because there's water. Obviously, you know, you got to water the plants. Sometimes you can have, you know, some reptiles out there like snakes and things of that sort. But it is a very hot, dry climate, and our workers are out there, our farm workers are out there, and the documented workers are out there, you know, providing for their families and providing for all of us.
I was going to say, our organization, Farmworker Justice, was instrumental in winning the federal field sanitation standard. So it requires toilets and hand washing facilities and drinking water in the fields, but it doesn't go far enough. So we've been supporting federal legislation that would basically follow what California has adopted for farm workers around preventing deaths and illnesses from heat in the fields. Basically, it would require rest breaks during times of high heat, and it requires shade during times of high heat. So you're doing a lot better on that front in California than we are for the rest of the country. And as you mentioned, there are a number of ways in which the state of California is responding more aggressively to help farm workers and undocumented immigrants and other vulnerable populations who are at risk due to the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yeah, you know, the state, you know, the Coachella Valley, we have a very early history with Cesar Chavez and the United Farm Workers, specifically the city of Coachella. In fact, some of the first labor union strikes came out of the city of Coachella when it was not the Latino or a Mexican that walked out, but it was actually the Filipino community that walked out of the fields and started fighting for you know, farm worker rights. So we've seen progress here. There's a lot, you know, left to be done, but you know, we want to protect our workers. I think the owners, the folks that own the agricultural fields, understand the value of the worker as well, because they understand that if they don't have the labor, their harvest is going to suffer. And in some cases, even before COVID, you had some labor shortages. And so the big thing is trying to protect the workers out there right now and give them a decent wage.
Right, and we and other organizations have been pressing Congress to adopt a hazard pay or premium pay for these essential workers who are expected to work during this most dangerous time. And I was going to ask you, you've described a lot of the efforts that the state of California and you at the county level have been engaged in the city level. Are there things that you would like the federal government to be doing?
I think you hit the nail on the head there, Bruce, about hazard pay. It makes no sense that our most essential workers, folks that are providing for us so that we can eat, are going day in and day out and working day in and day out, long hours, you know, to provide food for us, risking their health and safety, and yet they don't get any hazard pay. Now, I've been around a lot of police officers and firefighters. They're getting hazard pay right now during COVID. But it doesn't make any sense for me right now that the folks that are picking our grapes or picking our crops are out there, you know, 15 to 20 of them have gotten sick in one location. In meat packing plants throughout the nation, they're getting sick. I haven't seen a situation right now where, 15 to 20 officers or firefighters got sick in one location. I just haven't seen it. Now, I'm not trying to diminish the work of anybody. I just want to say that, when we're thinking about emergencies and particularly pandemics, who are the people that are really essential to keeping us alive as a nation? And you're starting to hear conversations happen right now about hunger and food hunger and the lack of food in some different places of the nation. Well, it's going to be our immigrant community. It's going to be these migrant farm workers, these undocumented folks that can really help and address these situations, because, if you've ever been around them, they're hard workers. They don't want to hand out. Those guys, they're all about hands up and working and believe in work and is dignity. But we need to protect them because they are very, very essential to everything that's happening in this pandemic. And here's the one point that is very important. COVID is not going to just, we're not going to flip a light switch tomorrow and COVID's going to go away. We're going to be dealing with this systematically as a government for the next 2 years, possibly even 3 years. So the more we can refine, the more we can acknowledge, who's really out there being essential, the better off we're going to be. The other ones that are in that same boat are truckers. You have a lot of truckers right now that I don't believe are getting hazard pay, but they are risking their lives as well. Some of them have gotten sick. And recent reports have suggested as well that the supply chains are being affected. And so, we really need to think about, in a pandemic, who are essential workers.
And one of the things we're doing is trying to publicize the essential nature of the work, the contributions farm workers are making to this country, so that over the longer run, we stop discriminating against farm workers in the labor laws. Farm workers at the federal level and in most states are not treated equally with other workers. As essential workers, they should be treated at least equally, if not better, for being so essential. So we'll continue to strive for equality for farm workers and build on the reality that some people are starting to recognize, is that farm workers feed us. And if they're not there to feed us, we're all in trouble.
Yeah, and for anybody who's against that idea, then stop eating grains. Don't eat a vegetable. You'll realize that you can't just live on protein. And it's these farm workers. It's our migrant community that is out there and providing for us on a daily.
Right. Well, I want to thank you very much, Stephen Hernandez, Mayor of Coachella, California, for joining us today. We really appreciate your helping us spread the word about what's going on for farm workers in this country during the era of COVID-19. Farm Worker Justice is engaged in a lot of activities to try to help farm workers get through this and get to a better place. We're advocating for hazard pay for occupational safety and health standards that would be issued by the federal government. We're helping farm worker groups prepare materials in languages that farm workers understand, so they know how to protect themselves. We're working with some groups around the country that are asking us if we know how to get access to masks, face masks. And some people and groups have contacted us and said, hey, we're making masks. We'd be happy to donate them to farm workers. So if you're among those people making those masks, shoot us a message on our Facebook page or through our website, connect@farmworkerjustice.org, our email, and we'll try to make those connections. We also will put in a pitch for donations to Farm Worker Justice. We're a not-for-profit organization. We depend on people like you to support our work, and you can make a donation on our website or by sending a donation in the mail to the address on our website. Our series began this week of farm workers in the COVID-19 era. It's going to continue next week every day. On Monday, we're going to be interviewing the president of the United Farm Workers Union, Teresa Romero, and we have other great guests coming up as well. So again, Stephen, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And we look forward to seeing you all. We'll be posting more videos each day. Please join us on our Facebook page and also join us on our social media. Oh, I should ask you before you go, do you have a social media handle that you'd like people to take a look at?
It's at Coachella Mayor.
At Coachella Mayor. Great. Thanks very much, Mayor of Coachella, Stephen Hernandez. Good day.
Talk to you soon. Bye.